This is the Lyndsay Stafford Show.
All right, welcome back to the Lyndsay Stafford Show. I'm super excited to share this episode with you all today. I am here with Hilson Merrill, the founder and owner and operator of Merrill Construction Group, based right here in Middle Tennessee. And Hilson Merrill has an amazing story to share with us today about scaling business, having super high standards of execution when it comes to people and processes, and also just the final project. Hello, I cannot speak today, but that's all part of the process, right? Thank you for being here.
So
today.
glad to be here.
Yeah. And
So
if I
glad
can
to be
speak
here.
today, it'll be even better.
Enunciation.
Yeah. Enunciate those words. Hilson, you have grown up in in Tennessee.
I have. I'm
So
from here. Been
yeah.
here a long time.
you're like a unicorn.
Yeah, what's even more interesting is my wife is also from here.
Serious. How did you guys meet?
We actually met the summer before 6th grade.
Are you kidding?
Yeah.
So 5th grade. So like what, you were like 11?
Something like that. 11,
Wow.
12, something like that. And then we were good friends through high school and, kind of dated per se. And then we both went to separate colleges, but then we both found ourselves back here and found each other.
Okay, so you broke up and you weren't together in college.
I mean, we were not
Okay.
together.
Yeah.
We were always aware of each other. And, you'd come back for Thanksgiving and stuff like that. We'd always reconnect. But I mean, there were other relationships. There were other, I call it other life experience.
Yeah.
But then we somehow got back together.
I love that. So how long have you been married?
11, almost 12 years.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yep.
I feel like if
A
you can
lot's
make it
happened
past
in 12
10.
years.
Yeah. Yeah. Because when was Merrill Construction Group founded?
2010.
So it was before you were married.
Before we were married, I definitely wanted to feel like I had some sort of direction before I was ready to kind of get married and take on that responsibility.
One of the things I love, and I've had the privilege of working with you now for a while, and one of the things I love about you is that very calculated. I'm not going to jump into anything. I want to really think it through. And I think that's one of the reasons you have had so much success.
I'm glad that's the perception.
Well,
is that the reality? I don't know. But,
I work with you enough to know that it's very rare that you're going to say yes, unless you've really thought it through.
True. I do want to understand what does yes mean.
Yep.
And what are the consequences of saying yes or no, and then kind of deciding what to do.
It's very analytical. My husband is very much like that. I tend to be like very quickly, positives, negatives, yes or no. Very quickly. If it's not a hell yes, it's a hell no. But I tend to be pretty confident in whether it's a yes or no. And if I see that quality, it intrigues me because I don't think that way typically. So I love that about you. And I think there's a lot of success that you've had that goes back to that, thinking about your team and the work that you guys do and the projects that you take on and the process in which you do it, that finished work. There isn't any skimping on quality and execution when it comes to Merrill Construction Group.
True. Very true. We try to always put our best foot forward and try to produce something that we're always going to be proud of. Have we fallen short of that at times? Sure. But then we would always come back and fix.
And there's always going to be mistakes and things that happen, right? It's about how you recover from that.
That I think you couldn't have said it better. Construction in particular has a million moving parts and a lot of people involved, and communication is difficult. And, we've never had a project where there wasn't a problem, but we've never not fixed a problem.
Tell me one of the challenging problems you've had that you guys have been through that you solved. You can leave names and street names out of it.
I think I have told this story to you before or mentioned it before, but we did have a problem in a project that we did where, we're getting close to the end and the homeowner kind of looks at me and is like, just the cabinetry just doesn't feel right. And I too didn't think that it felt right. But we finished the project, and then I just wasn't satisfied. And so what we did is we actually came back in and took out all the cabinetry and replaced it with a different vendor and did it right at no cost to them. And I just felt like that was a good example of a problem that we took responsibility for and we handled.
And you didn't have to do that. And
no,
in
we
fact,
didn't have to do it.
Most people wouldn't do that. Most.
No, it cost us a fortune.
Right. What'd you do with the other cabinets?
I took them to my shop at my farm and I used them as a countertop or as storage there.
And I'm sure they were not inexpensive.
No.
So you have really nice storage in your farm.
We do. We do. But she has even nicer cabinets in her kitchen.
But the fact that you go above and beyond and say, I'm going to make it right, speaks volumes about and I know your mission, vision, and guiding principles. Not everybody does, but the detail that goes into your execution and the care about the final project results and the people that you're working with is evident. And that's a great example of it.
Yeah. And, I think that in construction, it's kind of two-faced. And one side is, it's really easy to be successful. You have to do two things. You have to call people back and you have to do what you say you're going to do. When you kind of actually practice that, it is harder than one might think, but it's kind of two simple principles that if you do those two things, you'll probably be successful.
And that last 10%, finishing
the last 10% takes as long and as much effort as the first 90% every time.
Yep. How do you set that bar for your team? And I'm asking mostly for listeners because I know more than other people might, just in our relationship. But I want you to talk about how do you set that bar for your team and hold them accountable to the high standards?
Well, it's all about having some measurables. We've always had some sort of system of measuring, whether that's, hey, we let the production team know, like, this is the completion date that we are committing to with the client. It is your job that we make sure we hit that. And so at the end of the job, we look at it and we say, did you hit the date or did you not? And then we look at that over a quarter, a year, or however long. And we say, okay, we're seeing a problem here. How do we fix this? And, I've had this word in my head that's been like a recurring theme, empowerment. And it's not that I'm trying to push or motivate people. I'm more trying to empower people to live up to their fullest potential. And I think that people can do way more than they think they can do. And they're way more capable than they think they are.
I think that's a really good, fair statement. And you see it in people, so you push them to do more because they're capable of more.
Absolutely. And I know that, at least for me personally, I feel accomplished when I have done something, and especially something that I've never done before, or tried something and it was successful, or tried a new system or a process and it worked, or it failed, or we learned something from it. And I think that it's important to kind of pass that along to your people and say, just humor me and let's try this. And then when they see it work, I can see it in their faces, just like a feeling of success, we did it, or things like that. Like, And I really honestly think that people can just do way more than they think they can do.
I love that. You push them to do more. I want you to tell me a little bit about when you started. I know a little bit of the history, but tell our listeners a little bit about the history of when you started Merrill Construction Group. Who was it? How'd you start? And let's talk about how you grew, some of the phases.
Well, the impetus for the company is that I spent 5 years being a carpenter, and I was working for another guy. And that's where I really fell in love with the trade of carpentry. And I was out there framing houses, and I was out there, running crown molding and building staircases, and really getting a firsthand knowledge of how does this work. And then I realized that the guy I was working for was an unbelievable mentor from a carpentry perspective, but maybe not as from like a business perspective. And I honestly just thought I could do it better. I've been told my whole life that I was kind of a leader. And so I thought that I could lead better than he was leading me. And ultimately, I never wanted to really work for anybody. So I left him and I filled up my truck full of tools, and being from here helped with just knowing a lot of people. So I went around and fixed all my parents' friends' houses, leaky windows and, maybe bathroom upgrades and things like that. And then the flood happened shortly after that in 2010. Which forced me to kind of hire some people. How do you run payroll? Like how does that work? And then kind of that forces you to understand how to kind of keep track of all that information in your accounting and things like that. And so that kind of helped blossom the company into doing some other jobs and kitchens and things like that. And we hit this, I call it a plateau, where for 2 or 3 years we had hit a level of revenue that we just could not get over. And so I started asking around, and I have a cousin who is in this business who kind of pointed me in the direction of a peer group. And I joined this peer group, and that right there was a defining moment for me because it opened my eyes up to some really professional companies, like remodeling companies from all around the country that had been around for 30, 40, 50 years and were doing big business. And I finally realized, I was like, wow, I didn't even know you could make a remodeling company into something like that. And I learned the key metrics and the things that I needed to learn, and utilized all the resources from that group and really got good at the accounting piece and things like that, and understood what a professional business looks like. And so it's not like I invented the wheel. I just kind of took those ideas and copied, but with my own flavor. And then since then, it just has been the right place at the right time. I mean, Nashville over the last 10 years has just seen unbelievable growth. And, there's a lot of aging homes where we work. And then there's also a lot of, zoning things that are happening that make it harder and harder to tear things down. So it becomes more attractive to people to remodel. And that just fits perfectly into what we do.
You're so humble with everything that you're sharing, because I hear what you're saying, but I also hear that this is a company that has built a brand image that people know. Merrill Construction Group, Merrill Design and Build, they know the name and the areas that you work in, and you have a strong reputation for excellent work and for fulfilling what you say you're going to do. And I think all of that might be true, but you also have earned that spot, right?
I will say, deep down, I am a competitive person. And if I'm going to do it, I want to do it right. And I want to be good at it. Whether it was new hobbies or anything that I did kind of growing up, I was always nervous to start things because I wasn't as good as the people that I saw that I wanted to copy. But I always stuck with things, whether that was, I love fly fishing, and I remember learning how to fly fish and getting flies stuck in the trees and all kinds of knots everywhere. But then I finally got good at it, and I became that vision of who I wanted to be. And I think that plays a lot into how we run the business. Is, I have a vision of I had a vision of what I wanted it to be. And I just kind of took the steps to make it happen.
Well, and you took your strengths of slowing down enough to really measure the consequences of what decisions you're making. And I think that has really, when I look at how long you've been around and what you guys have been able to accomplish, knowing where you want to go and being able to go quick enough, but also slow down enough to make sure you're making calculated decisions. I think there's a really healthy balance that you have there. Fly fishing is probably a great example of something that's probably really hard to master, right?
Sure.
Do you golf?
I used to golf a lot.
Because I just started golfing and I'm not very good. And that's hard because I, like you, want to be really good.
And people are watching you when you're playing golf.
Yes, totally. Which I'm okay with that. I'm okay saying like I'm learning and I'm not good.
Sure.
And I don't have like an ego to be like, I have to be the best at this. But I will say, investing in lessons, like I'm so excited to actually get better and be able to go out and be like, I actually know how to play. But I totally relate to that of like, you want to be the best at what you're doing. And I think Merrill Construction Group has developed that name. I want you to talk about how you've scaled your business and what makes you guys different. Because when I think about reliability, calling people back, doing the work you say you're going to do, the way the construction site looks when you have Merrill sign and you are on that site, your standards are very different from what's common, right? If I think about what's common in your industry, you guys are like this. It's a completely different standard. So I want you to talk about how you've been able to scale and add people and maintain that level of excellence.
Yeah, I think it all comes down to systems and how you deal with things. If you're doing something more than twice, then there needs to be a system for it. And that goes all the way to calling people back, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, let's say you get 15 calls a week of people that want to do a project. Well, it's not just you can't just have a pile of phone messages.
Right.
Where does that message go? How does that information get to me? What do we do with that after we call them back? Then what happens? Then what happens? Then what happens? And so on. So I think it's all about a system.
You have to develop the system that meets your expectations.
Correct.
Right? I just talked about this with Megan Jernigan, who was just on podcast on my last episode. Having those systems in place allows you to scale your business.
Yeah.
How did you learn that? What was that intuitive for you, or was there someone who said, "Hey, we've got to create a system"?
I think that when I started to do things more than twice and realizing how inefficient it was, then I said to myself, okay, how can I do this many, if not more, but make it easier to do it?
Yeah.
And that's when I really understood what systems were.
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned I joined that peer group, and my first year or so in that group, they always said, well, you got to have systems and systems and systems. And I had no idea what they were talking about. And until you really live it and feel it, you don't know what it is. But I mean, we have systems for how do you answer the phone, to what form do you fill out, to when do you call the people back, to how does this meeting work, to how do we inspect our work, how do we close out a job, those types of things. And I would even say that we need more systems to do more things, which is what we are constantly working on.
Always. Megan and I just talked about this too. It is a constant work in progress to evaluate and upgrade. And I think when your standards are always high, and not to mention the world that we live in with the resources we have today, think about just adding in AI to the picture is, okay, that changes everything, because how do we create that system, right? How do we create that system or change the system with the resources that we have available today that we didn't have?
All right. And, technology is always changing. And I think that implementation of technology can help make things a lot easier. I think you always have to be careful not to lose that personal touch, though.
Yeah. Agreed.
And
Yeah. And you're the one who's talking to people that call about working with you guys.
Yes.
I mean, you're not the first person that talks to
them. But ultimately, I am the one that represents the company to a client.
So you went from doing the actual carpentry work yourself in your parents' friends' houses.
Yeah, I'm the furthest thing from a carpenter.
Right, but that is how you scale a business. And what I see in what I do is most business owners never want to get away from doing that work.
Well, I don't think those are business owners. Those are tradespeople or practitioners or things like that.
Well, they might own a business too, but I agree.
Sure. I think that most contractors become contractors because they were a carpenter and then they want to make their own business, but they have no formal business training. And I think that that's in general of most practices in the country. That's why most businesses fail within the first 3 or 4 or 5 years. It's because it's all about what are the product and not the actual backside.
Right.
And
the processes.
And how does it work? And how do you get money? How do you when do you bill somebody?
When you think about how you scaled to 18 team members now.
Yes.
Do you remember how it felt giving up that first?
Oh, I'll never forget. You know what? I'll say this. I have always found that it's time to hire somebody when you're doing a lot of work that you think you can hire somebody else to do 80% or better than you can do it. But that whatever it is what you were doing doesn't make you money. Mm-hmm. So, for example, I was a salesperson. I was a project manager. I was a bookkeeper. I was a payroll person. I was a payables and receivables person and all those things. And then I realized I was like, okay, what am I really good at? What's the value that I bring? And what are the things that I'm doing that are limiting my ability to do that one thing that brings the most value? So I'll never forget kind of saying, all right, I think I need to bring in what I would call an overhead position. But that's scary when you're a small business because you're like, how am I going to pay for this? And it's one of those leaps of faith you have to take. And then when you start to realize like, oh, wow, we're much more successful now because I actually had that person and I was bringing so much more value. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of how it went with like growing the team. Was first it was kind of a bookkeeper type person, and then it was a project manager type person, and then it was kind of building up the field team to fulfill the projects that we were getting. And then it kind of was like more of that copying of other companies to kind of follow the design build model and bring in architecture and interior design and everything like that. And our goal is to take somebody that has ideas about what they want and take them through the entire process of designing it and thinking it through and then selecting the tile to go into the bathroom all the way through. We're actually installing it and building it to, wow, isn't this a beautiful space that we created together?
And you got to have a whole team to do that.
Yeah. Whole team.
So your first hire was on the admin side.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that alleviated so much time. I don't want to say overnight, but I'll never forget when she started. We kind of were like, okay, I think this is going to be kind of a part-time gig. And in about a weekend, we both looked at each other and said, I don't think this is a part-time job anymore. And it quickly became a 40-hour-a-week plus job for her.
Who was your first hire? First admin?
Tori was my first admin. Yeah. And she's been with me over 7 years. And unfortunately, she's retiring this year, which we're going to miss her dearly, but because she's really helped me build this and helped me put these systems in place.
Yeah, she's awesome.
There's some big shoes to fill for sure.
Yes, that's for sure. Carrie, my assistant, has been with me for 7 years.
Yeah. And
it was very similar. When she started, I was in a direct sales company and I was working my full-time job. I was working for Nike at the time, traveling all the time. And I brought her on for like 5 hours a month. And was like, wait a second, she's like really good. I can have her do so much more than she's doing, and just kept giving her more work. And then eventually it became, full time. And
again, realizing that people can do way more than they think they think they can do.
And then giving it to them, right? that acknowledging that somebody can do something, maybe not exactly the way I would do it, but as good, the outcome is going to be as good or almost as good as what I would do, is a scary thing to, feel like business owners or entrepreneurs, for one of two reasons. There's probably others, but the two big reasons is they want to micromanage it because they want it done their way.
Well, they want to have control.
They want to,
it's hard to relinquish control.
Yeah.
I mean, the business is your baby.
Mm-hmm.
And, but when you start to realize that a team can do way more than an individual, it starts to get easier to delegate.
And you have gotten to a place where you're really comfortable doing that. Do you ever still like waver of like, wait a second. Okay, no, I'm going to back off.
I still interject. And I think to my job as an owner as the owner hat is really to be a cheerleader and just say, you can do this and you can do more than you think you can do. And it's time for you to step up and do it. Because, people get job fatigue and, maybe they're doing great for a while and something happens outside of work or, you just got to create that safe space and then just really, again, empower people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think that's important.
When you have a situation where you're not happy with the decision that's been made or the way it's been executed, how do you handle that as the owner of the business?
I start asking questions first because I never want to assume. Usually I'm getting information secondhand. So such and so may tell me, hey, such and such happened on this job. They let me know this, blah, 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 blah. So then I start asking questions of the information giver, the messenger. And then I start to go to the other parties involved and ask questions. And then I ask people, hey, do you think we handled this well? Mm-hmm. It's not necessarily... I like for people to get to the solution on their own, even though I may know the solution. And my way of doing that is by asking questions to then let them realize really what the problem is.
That is an art. And I want to dig into that and talk about where you learned that, because for me, it came from really good leaders that I had the privilege of working with and for back in my 20s. And I spent my first 10 years of leadership. Well, it was like leading I ran a tanning salon and managed it in high school. Okay. But real job, not like whatever. I think I was making $5 an hour in high school, but, limited brands. So Les Wexner is like the king of retail in Columbus, Ohio. And I had the privilege of being in a very exciting position in my 20s where I was pretty much always the youngest one in the space and had the opportunity to go through limited brands training and development and work for some really good, and I worked for some not so good leaders, but I worked for some really great leaders that taught me how to do that, ask questions to lead to insights. And there's the results cone, which is insights lead to changing thinking, which changes results, versus I'm going to tell you what the result I want you to do is.
Yeah.
And so I'm always fascinated because that is not a natural thing for most people to lead that way. Most people are moved to direct tell because it's faster. It's not as effective, but it's faster to get their thoughts transferred to somebody else. So I'm curious, where do you think that came from?
I think it came from a couple of places. I think the first place it came from was from my dad, who is probably the most humble person I've ever met in my life. He was in a profession that was known for people that were very proud of themselves and wanted to let people know about it. But he was just an extremely kind is a extremely kind and gentle, humble man who has had an extreme, just a significant impact on me and how I kind of try to go about the world. And I am not as calm and cool as collected as he is. But I think that's where it started.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that, leadership first comes from humility. And then I think it also come from seeing and witnessing like poor examples.
Mm-hmm.
Every time I worked for people, it was for people that weren't, I had jobs like, I worked in some retail stuff.
Not tanning salons though.
Not tanning salons. And I just, I kind of was the receiver of some leadership that was more rough and, direct. And it just, for me, it wasn't effective.
Yeah.
And then it came from actually, I mentioned this peer group before. And so part of like an ancillary service was to kind of get sales training. And so I went through a Sandler sales training system. Okay. And in Sandler, it talks a lot about, hey, when you're selling stuff, you should be talking 20% of the time. And the client or prospect or whomever should be talking 80% of the time. And the way you do that is you ask questions. And so I kind of just took that into like all aspects of life, which is, essentially you're always selling. Like, I know the answer. I want you to get to the answer. Yeah. I'm selling you this answer. Let me question you until you get to it.
Yeah.
Those are kind of the factors at play, I think.
Talk a little bit more about your dad's influence. I love what you shared, and I love that you brought it back to that peer group. It's always amazing to me. I think back at my time in limited brands in my 20s, and I'm so fortunate that I had those experiences that really positioned me to do the things that I did after that. And I think about my dad's highly influential in my life. I mean, I think I've told you that we live next door together. I see him every single morning. He's, an incredible business-minded man who's sounds very similar to your dad, just super humble and wants to just he would give the shirt off his back to somebody in need. And I think about his example to me in the day-to-day business coaching I get from him. And I'm so grateful. I want to hear a little bit more about your dad and that relationship and how that was formed.
My dad, he had a job that required him to be gone a lot. But I'll never forget whenever he was around, no matter how tired he was, he would always be ready to throw the ball or, be a part of the experience. And, he wanted to do everything he could. But he is the ultimate, man of sacrifice. Whether it was his time or his energy or anything, he probably like your dad, he'd do anything for anybody, and he always enjoys like helping people. And just super humble and kind. Never heard him raise his voice once.
Wow. I can't say that. I mean, I haven't heard your dad raise his voice, but I can't say the same for my dad. But and I mean that in the, he's amazing. All positive things. Yeah. Not perfect, but super positive. What a gift that is, right?
Yeah. And it's interesting too, because, my paternal grandfather passed away when my dad was like 9.
Wow.
So he didn't even really like have a true dad growing up to learn from, but he had a lot of extended family, like uncles and things like that were very involved with him and helped him along the way. And my dad grew up in this tiny town in Alabama. Okay. And has done just some amazing worldly things. And I think it's amazing the journey that he has been on. And that to me is humbling, because what we do is not, he was a cardiac and thoracic surgeon.
Wow.
And so what I do is nothing compared to what he does on a daily basis to save people's lives and do heart transplants and things like that.
I mean, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow, what an incredible.
He likes to joke that he's the plumber and I'm the carpenter.
Well, that's true in some ways, right?
Yeah.
What a cool thing. Think about that. Your dad didn't have an example of what to be. And I think sometimes we learn either from the example we have or from what we wish we had.
Yeah.
And has been able to, to create that. And is he local?
Yeah.
Yes.
He lives in Nashville still.
So you still see him all the
Yeah.
time?
Oh yeah. And I mean, just I got to say he has definitely, he helped open doors for me and gave me a lot of opportunity to, I think I used those opportunities to my advantage in a good way,
Right.
not took advantage of, but like understood the gifts that I had been given and took the responsibility seriously to like go out and do
it right.
Yeah, it took me a long time though. I mean, I was 24, 25, 26 before I realized like, all right, we gotta like get it together here.
I think most people have to get to their mid-20s. I got married at 23 and had my daughter at 24. So I like...
Wow, that was young.
Well, yeah. I mean, Dave and I met, got engaged, got married, bought a house and had a baby in 1 year.
Wow.
Crazy,
That
right?
is
We just were
crazy.
like, we're just going to get it done.
Yeah.
Remember how I talked about you really think through the consequences of things, and I tend to be like, yes, no, right? Well, we've been married 20 years, so we did right. But
sometimes I feel like though I just make the decision and it works out.
when you, but I've seen you where you trust your gut and you do make the decision, and
True.
you just know. But I think that's an intuition thing, right?
Yeah.
And you have to, it's the same thing. Like you have to have the balance of let me process that for certain things, and I really respect that. I also think about legacy. So when I think about Merrill Construction Group, I think the word legacy, because Merrill Construction Group, in the way that you have set up and are building, continuing to build and pour into the company, is a lot of construction companies, they exist while their founder is there, and then they're gone when the founder's gone.
True.
And that is not how Merrill Construction Group is set up. It is set up to be a legacy company for years and years and years to come, even surpassing you, because of some of the things that you have done and are doing to put in place.
Well, I've always thought, what's the point of doing all this for 20, 30 years and then all of a sudden you're like, all right, I'm ready to just wrap it up. And then you just close the doors. I've always been somewhat intentional of creating a business that can be sustainable. And personally, I want to become more and more irrelevant to the company so that it can go on without me. And I think that that's good for the people that work for us. I think it's good for the clients that we work for, so that let's say we finish a project. Well, we're not going to be gone in 2 years,
right? So
we can't come back and help you fix something or whatever it may be, or do the next project.
Yeah.
We want to be around a long time. I like to think of myself as still relatively young,
for sure.
and I'll be doing this for a long time. But I do want it to, in some form or fashion, continue on after my time is done.
And that is unique, especially when you own the company and your name is on the company. I've talked to other people in your same kind of line of work, and it's like, oh, well, that's my name. I can't have anyone else representing. That's my business, right? And I think you have this humility and this lack of ego where you don't have to be the only one touching everything that happens in your business. You're comfortable saying.
I'm getting tired of touching everything in the business.
One more thing I want to say about legacy. I have seen you in the summer months when the kids are home.
Yeah.
And you guys are doing your kid thing, and kids at your camp, and or you're
going all over the place.
On the farm and all the things. And I think the legacy that your dad left with you, you're passing that on and building something and showing your family how you do that.
I will say that, because my dad's job was very demanding, he missed a lot of games. He missed a lot of things, and I was never mad at him for it. It just was what it was. And, but for me, it's been really important for me to go to the baseball game and go to the school thing and create a job for me with that flexibility to take the kids on a week-long trip or whatever, and just be present. And that's important to me.
And you're really good at that. You really do a very good job with boundaries, and one thing I have been able to see in you is that you're going to be present. You're going to be the dad that's there, and you're going to run your business, but there's going to be a boundary of when you're going to.
We were talking about how did the business grow? Well, for a long time, we ran this thing in a room in my house. And then I got married, and then we had a baby, and I was working at home. My wife and the baby were home. And just because I was home, I think that my wife assumed that I could just always do stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So then it was like, I got to get out of here.
I got to get an office.
Yeah, I got to get out of here. But then the positive to that is like, when the office was at home, I'd be laying in bed thinking of something work-wise and be like, I'll just run downstairs and do that.
Yeah.
But now that we actually have a place of work, it's good because like when I go to work, I'm at work. When I leave there, I leave there and I'm at home. And, we at first we kind of designed a home office and I just never used it. And I was like, we don't need this. Like, I don't.
Oh, so you don't even have an office at home?
No,
at all?
No. I mean, I'll sometimes write an email on my kitchen table, but like when I go home, I don't want to work.
Yeah.
And when I'm at work, I got to be at work.
And those are such cool boundaries. I have a very similar experience growing up. My dad was in retail, which is why I started, the retail, even though he didn't want me to be in retail. It was like, but he was, he retired 2 years ago, but he was the vice president for product development and strategic sourcing for Tractor Supply Company. That was his last job. Why we all came to Tennessee.
I gotcha.
So they came and we followed them. Nike moved me here for my role when I was with them. But they knew I wanted to get here, which is why we ended up here. But anyhow, my dad traveled a lot, so he missed a lot. I remember birthdays, he was in China all the time and gone. And my mom didn't work she worked until she had baby number 3. And then she was home because I'm the oldest of 5. And that was one thing for me that was super important. When I was in my 20s, I was running a store first. I was a store manager and then I was a district manager. And I remember when I had Isabel saying, I'm not going to be working retail like this. I'm going to be there for everything for the kids. And even today, I moved everybody around a little bit today because I found out there's a pep rally at school that I could go to this morning. It was like, no, I'm going to be there for that. And I think that's so important. And it's a different world that we live in today than it was, when you and I were growing up.
Yes.
Because we have that flexibility. There's ways that you can put that in place. And that's something that's really important to me for everyone on my team, that there's total flexibility and autonomy, that you don't have hours that you're set working. You work when you get your job done and you be there for your family and you do the things that are important to you.
Yeah. And I think it's important to figure out what's right for you. What is your priorities? What are your priorities? There's only so many days that we get on this planet. What is it that you want to be doing with those days? And as long as you keep those priorities straight, not that you or I's are better than anybody else's, it's just whatever works for you. And then, having some integrity with that, and then just having some reasonable thought processes and, just good, just values, you will be successful. And what does success look like to you may be different than what it does to me. And I think it's just important to have some perspective and really understanding what does success mean to you, and try to just write that down and make goals and do things every day that kind of point you in that direction, and you will get there.
I don't think I could have said it better. It's pretty much the perfect ending for this episode. That's exactly right. Figure out what matters most and then just work towards.
Just do that.
Yeah, just do that.
It sounds a lot easier. And, I remember making vision boards when I was, in my 20s, and putting things like pictures of like a truck that I wanted, or, I really wanted like a nice, comfortable home, and, just the idyllic life that I wanted. And it was interesting. I pulled that thing out not too long ago, and I like crossed off like 6 of the 10 things. And I was like, we're doing it, man.
Yeah, it's happening. I didn't even need the vision board. I just did it.
Yeah.
Yeah. You have that vision and you just go after it. Well, you guys are doing such great things.
Thank you.
MerrillConstructionGroup.com, your website.
Yep.
and you can find him on all channels, social media.
We're there.
Everywhere. Lots of great content there. And the works of art, I really feel like that's what it is, that Merrill Construction Group designs and builds is just incredible. So check them out on socials, check out the website. And if you're in, can you, before we finish, because we have a lot of listeners here in Middle Tennessee, can you talk about what areas you serve and who might want to call you?
Yeah, I mean, we service kind of the area too of Nashville, Green Hills, Belmead, Westmead, Sylvan Park, Belmont, Waverly, all around there, all the way to Old Hickory Boulevard. And, we're all kind of on the southwest side of town. We do projects in other areas of town too, if they're the right fit. And, we do all types of projects. We do everything from changing light bulbs for people to, hey, let's remodel your whole home. And we can walk you through that whole process from just ideas that you have through the architecture piece, through the design piece, and eventually through the construction. We do it all.
Awesome. Check out Merrill Construction Group. Hilson, thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Lyndsay.
Thanks for listening, guys. If you found value in today's episode, think about all those great moments that were shared of education and tips. Share this episode with somebody. Like it, share it, rate it, review, all the things. We'll see you next time.